This is Becoming UnDone.
From the years of, I want to say 2011 through 2017, I ended up accumulating like 13 surgeries at this time. Yeah, it was extremely difficult mentally and physically. And yeah, you always had to just have this fight mentality. Like, I am good at this game. I am injured right now, but I need to find out if I can squeeze more out of my career. I realized I was going to retire during the game, and it was a big emotion. Like, I cried a lot that day. So this is definitely dark times. So what am I going to do now? And what's next? Like, I don't know anything else. I was, like I said, I was a young child and I learned that I loved baseball, and now I'm 30. With depression, understand why I was feeling this way. Ultimately, I felt and I knew that deep down it was a lack of purpose. I am Ryan Kalish, and I am undone.
Hey friend, I'm glad you're here. Welcome to yet another episode of Becoming UnDone, the podcast for those who dare bravely, risk mightily, and grow relentlessly. I'm Toby Brooks, a speaker, author, professor, and learning scientist. I've spent much of the last 2 decades working as an athletic trainer and a strength coach in the professional, collegiate, and high school sports settings. And over the years, I've grown more and more fascinated with what sets high achievers apart and how failures that can stink in the moment can end up being exactly what we needed to propel us along our paths to success. Each week on Becoming UnDone, I invite new guests to examine how high achievers can transform from falling apart to falling into place. I'd like to emphasize that this show is entirely separate from my role at Baylor University, but it's my attempt to apply what I've learned and what I'm learning and share with others about the mindsets of high achievers. I'm going to be honest with you. I've been doing this show for more than 2 years now. Becoming UnDone is all about stories that challenge, inspire, redefine what it means to rise from setback. I've interviewed Super Bowl champions, NBA stars, Navy SEALs, Grammy Award-winning artists, and countless others. Each and every one accomplished in their own way. People who stared failure and setback and adversity straight in the eye and didn't blink. But this week's guest and his story reached a part of me, and it hit differently. This week, I'm thrilled to welcome a guest whose journey takes us from the green monster of Fenway Park and the ivy of Wrigley Field to the lonely, quiet reflection of personal reinvention. Ryan Kalish grew up a standout athlete, a phenom who excelled in both baseball and football and seemed destined for superstardom. But that path took a different turn, one marked by 14 surgeries, countless comebacks, and a relentless pursuit of purpose beyond the game. Now joining me and you all the way from Thailand, Ryan opens up about the highs of playing for the Red Sox and the Cubs, the lows of injury and rehab and loss, to the surprising ways he's channeling his athletic past into a new mission. His story is raw, real, stirring. It's a testament to the power of persistence. Brace yourself, because in the next few minutes, I promise, you're going to explore what it means to truly become undone. Let's dive in. Really excited about this one. Joining me from Thailand is Ryan Kalish, who is celebrated athlete, both in baseball primarily, but also in football, and a long story of overcoming injury and has kind of transformed that into a new mission. So Ryan, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, man, no worries. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So this show is really about how adversity and setback and failure can set us up for success in later phases of life. And read up about your story. You were a celebrated high school athlete, both in football and in baseball. It looks like New Jersey is where you kind of cut your teeth as a young athlete. I always start at the beginning. What did you want to be growing up and why?
Baseball player. That was it. Was kind of. I was 9 years old. My mom bought a Nerf bat and a Nerf baseball, and the next thing you know, I'm obsessed. I just have her throw me the ball, and I want to hit the ball. And honestly, truth be told, it feels like it chose me. It doesn't really feel like I chose baseball or athletics in general. So it was very, very easy. Yeah, it just came to me. I loved it. I loved sports. And the next thing you know, life's gone by and it's a career.
Yeah. Well, I read in your bio that you were known for your speed. Obviously, base stealing was something that you were known for, but also a decorated football player as well. And that decision coming out of high school, whether to go pro or to try to play two sports in college, talk me through that decision-making process and the recruitment efforts.
I mean, football was kind of blossomed a little bit later. I started baseball when I was 9. High school football was when I first started playing football. So, it was, I don't know, something new and a great sport, but I wasn't necessarily sure if I wanted to pursue that. And I had no idea what it was going to be like. I ended up accepting a scholarship to the University of Virginia. But yeah, I never ended up making it there, as I got drafted by the Red Sox and decided to sign ultimately. So the process was really fun. I mean, it's kind of nice to be wanted, by multiple people for your talents. So I had an enjoyable time. I had plenty of offers. But yeah, ultimately decided to sign professionally at 18.
Yeah, tremendous. At that point in your life, you'd seen a lot of success and you enter baseball as a professional athlete. Obviously, you don't start off in the big leagues. You got to cut your teeth and work your way up. What was your relationship with failure up to that point in your life?
Relationship with failure? That's a great question. I don't think I had much failure up to that point. Honestly, now that you asked the question, I mean, it was obvious very young that I was elite at baseball and athletics in general. And yeah, I mean, in the classroom, to be honest, I wasn't super interested. I wanted to play sports. And yeah, failure was there, but in the short term, it really never lasted. It was definitely something that I learned later as the years would go on.
Yeah. I came across a quote from Peter Gammons, of all people, that said, Ryan Kalish is a totally different athlete. He was advocating for you to your teammates in the Red Sox clubhouse. So it's all great things, success after success. You've got a bright future ahead. Your major league debut occurs on July 31st, 2010. Talk me through that experience and what it was like to step on a big league field as a big leaguer for the first time.
And it was completely surreal, just to say the least. I mean, it was actually a very last second call up to the big leagues. So I didn't have much time to think, which is even better, right? You just want to get out there and play. But yeah, it was very surreal. Even thinking back on it today, I mean, it's an achievement that I need to be proud of, because as we obviously in this podcast will tap into the injuries and everything, there has been a lot of times where I do look at my career as a failure, and I'm starting to turn that around.
Yeah. I've talked to many athletes who have reflected on their careers and mentioned that in the moment, you're so consumed with what's next and achievement, and whether it's making the team or making the starting rotation or whatever else. I had a guest, Charles Austin, who's an Olympic gold medalist, and he told me he's standing on the medal podium at the 96 games and he's pissed off at himself because he didn't break the world record. And just that thought that a high achiever has these goals and it's what leads you to that success, but in the moment, it doesn't let you really give yourself permission to take that in. And I can certainly see how, you want to be the cool guy. You don't want to seem like the moment's bigger than you, but at the same time, that's special. Not a lot of people get to play in a big league ballpark with a Red Sox jersey on.
It's definitely something that I now appreciate more than ever. I think I was very angry after my career ended and sad because of all the injuries and eventually not being able to play. So with some reflection years, I'm starting to see what you're saying finally.
Well, they said that they thought Kalish was going to be a superstar.
Well, if my research is correct, I kind of came across two injuries in particular that really kind of set your career in a different path. 2011, you crashed into a wall, missed most of that season. 2013, a shoulder injury derailed what was, as we said, Peter Gammons mentioning you as an elite athlete. You're headed toward superstardom. And suddenly that's not quite so certain. So talk me through that injury process and what it was like for you to navigate, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally.
Okay, so from the years of, I want to say 2011 through 2017, I ended up accumulating like 13 surgeries at this time. And it's not even a joke. 13 is the number. It was extremely difficult mentally and physically just to go through those sort of processes. And they were not small surgeries. Some of them were. And you always had to just have this fight mentality. Like, I am good at this game. I am injured right now, but I need to find out if I can squeeze more out of my career. That was kind of the process that would go on and on. So it was like play for about 6 months, get injured for a year or 18 months. And I did this a few separate times. And to actually, by the end of my last comeback, which was with the 2016 Chicago Cubs, which we ultimately won the World Series that year, and I played 12 games for them, I knew the formula. The formula was get healthy. Like you have to get on the field and you need to start taking live at bats. And eventually I knew with enough at bats, I was going to be able to hit well again and play well again. And that belief was there. The belief that wasn't there is, can I actually stay healthy?
As I tend to do on this show, I'm going to squeeze my way in here and unpack a few things. First, you need to understand what Ryan was in high school in order to really understand the gravity of what he's been through since then. He was, by all accounts, what baseball folks would call a phenom. Other sports, a prodigy. Regardless, it's clear from what was written about him on his ascent, on the way up, that many respected sports writers, scouts, and coaches saw in him was the potential to be a transcendent talent in pro baseball, maybe even football if he chose to pursue it. Coming out of Shrewsbury, New Jersey as a senior in 2006, Ryan briefly flirted with the idea of being a two-sport athlete at the University of Virginia. In an article written by Peter Gammons for The Atlantic in 2018, Gammons recounted, quote, "It may be apocryphal, but folks in Red Bank, plus Red Sox scout Rafe Hagnett, claimed he never swung and missed at a pitch in his senior year of high school." End quote. Wait a minute. Never swung and missed at a pitch his senior season of high school? That's the kind of stuff that legends are made of. Not to mention clear signs of a prodigy, a man playing among boys. The other stats and bits of truth that sound more like folklore, but are actually true about his high school career, are almost as impressive. In baseball, 4-year starter, all conference, all division, struck out 10 batters in 6 innings in his first varsity pitching start as a freshman. He threw his first no-hitter as a sophomore. He hit .507 with 32 stolen bases and a 1.60 ERA as a junior. For his entire high school career, he hit .466 and struck out 190. And on the football field, he was almost as effective and even more of a dog. Playing quarterback, strong safety, punter, he led his team to a division championship by his senior year, and he was named the Jersey Shore Sports Hall of Fame High School Male Athlete of the Year. Unfortunately, thinking about going to college made many teams pass on him in the earlier rounds of the 2006 MLB draft. After all, why would a team burn a high draft pick on an athlete who likely isn't going to go pro just yet? And while Ryan was rated the number 76 prospect and number 2 in New Jersey, Billy Rowell was number 1 and went number 9 overall in the first round. Ryan ended up going in the 9th round when the Red Sox picked him up and signed him to a $600,000 deal, which was more like second-round money. So if you really think about it, you consider what the future looked like to an 18-year-old kid out of New Jersey with a deal worth more than $500,000 and a resume that read of one success after another. It'd be easy to see that same bright future, superstardom, and even more riches ahead. Unfortunately, that reckless abandon and that warrior mentality, likely forged on the football field, also made Ryan play differently than a lot of his peers, and sacrificing his body and playing through pain in order to make spectacular plays became commonplace. It wouldn't be long before its toll started to extract a heavy price.
And truth be told, I always kind of had this feeling, especially after, let's say, 6 or 7 surgeries, that like, it was almost hard to not think this is going to happen again. You're going to be healthy for a little bit of time, and then you're going to fall apart. And maybe my mind was powerful enough to make that happen, or it was just fate. I'll never know the truth. But yeah, it was a lot of battling through surgery beds and rehabs and pain on the fields. Never really felt great.
Right. And sadly, I think a lot of people don't really understand the logistics of this. I teach a sports psych class, and we talked about the story of Drew Robinson and how Drew had kind of bounced at the fringes of the MLB, AAA, kind of back and forth. Even if you're in one organization, you may be with multiple different teams throughout the season. So you don't have that. It's not like your high school team where your buddies are with you, or the athletic trainer or the coach that you trust is there with you. The physicians that are operating on you are different from one month to the next because you're in a different town. Mentally, what was that season like for you to navigate without having that consistency in an organization?
Yeah, it was quite isolating. I mean, most of my rehabs would happen at the spring training facilities of the place, like so Red Sox, Fort Myers, Chicago Cubs, Arizona. And it was always very lonely, man, you know. And you also I felt judged as the hurt guy, and it was very challenging for my like soul and my psyche to feel those sort of emotions. And it was sort of unsaid, like, oh, he's hurt again. It felt like people just, they get angry, they get upset with you, and it's not a very good feeling at all.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other side of that is, you know, you haven't established yourself as a starter for a particular, you're not locked in as that position guy. Someone else is gunning for your job, wherever you're at in the organization. And so having something to prove and knowing that you're capable, but at the same time, physically, you're not able to, there's a difference between ability and capability. And knowing that you're capable, but not being able to show that on the field is isolating. That's a lonely place to be. So you mentioned you're a 2-time world champion. Talk me through what that was like. I mean, all your friends back home just know you're a big leaguer. You're living the dream. Now you're a 2-time. First you win a World Series and then you get another one. But maybe it's not quite what it was cracked up to be.
Well, for me, it was completely different. You know, I wasn't playing. I played 12 games to earn 2 World Series. The first time with the Red Sox in 2013, literally, I did not play 1 game. I was on the injured reserve list. The second one with the Cubs, you know, it was, but you know, man, switching how like it could be sad, right? When I see it now, in retrospect, I mean, I have a combination of rings that only 4 players have in the entire ever Red Sox and Cubs. This combination there's 4 of us. To have those and to have fought long enough to have earned, especially the second one, when I think back to it, how I feel most people would have quit after 7 or 8 surgeries, and I pushed it all the way.
I can tell right here that Ryan has had some time to process all this. What it means to have had such a bright future dimmed by persistent, nagging, debilitating injuries. To have not 1 but 2 World Series rings. And I'll go out on a limb here and be fairly certain that at least part of him resented at some point those rings. Some might say competitors compete. Championships are won by the athletes playing all year and contributing, not by guys who are on the DL all season or called up for a few games. But honestly, that's a short-sighted, limited, and damaging view. After all, Ryan was working hard every day, and championships in baseball aren't won by one guy in a critical situation. They're won by organizations. Decisions and work and grind and effort from everyone, from the big league team right down to the developmental facility in the Dominican or the rookie ball team in the middle of nowhere. And he was part of it. Young Ryan might have brushed it off, but with time and with work, I think he now appreciates where this journey's taken him. And not just what it's cost him, but what it's given him. He's on a very short list of 4 human beings on the planet to have both a 2013 Red Sox and 2016 Cubs World Series ring, along with John Lester, John Lackey, and David Ross. And especially that Cubs ring. Not only did Ryan play 12 games with the Chicago team that season, he did so after many had already written him off from a future in baseball, after serious shoulder surgery, after a surgical fusion to remove a disc in his neck that also involved a steel plate and a graft harvested out of his hip. It was his fourth major surgery in less than 2 years. By 2014, he'd been traded to the Cubs and then free agency after a deal with the Toronto Blue Jays fell through. So to even make it back to baseball with the Cubs again in 2016, it was worth celebrating. But in the moment, I'd say it's safe to say Ryan wasn't celebrating. He was grinding. He was working. He was toiling to become the mythical version of himself he always expected to be as that indestructible 18-year-old in New Jersey. And as remarkable as that version of the story could have been, it wouldn't have produced the grounded, focused, and humble man you'd speak to today.
I mean, I squeezed as much as I was going to get out of my injury-riddled career. So,
yeah.
In retrospect, I was never actually there to celebrate. I wasn't part of playoffs. I was isolated at those moments, actually rehabbing. Mm-hmm. It was difficult, but yeah, like I said, in retrospect, man, my fight to get those was so great, a big fight, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, and you should be. I mean, remarkable the amount of wherewithal it takes to rally again, and just the mental energy that it takes to invest in a months long or years long rehab. I don't think we celebrate that enough. So that's awesome. So
thanks, man.
It's easy to remember your first. And I think about this in parenting. I think about this in my career. You know when you stepped onto a big league field for the first time, but you don't know when you've stepped on it for the last time. So talk me through that transition in your career and what it was like to make your way out of the Cubs organization. And it looks like you spent some time in independent ball. And so what was that like?
Well, I retired at that independent ball with the Connecticut team, the Bees. I knew it was coming. The end, my right knee was the biggest issue that I faced injury wise. And I just it did not feel well. It was cold there. I had put so much energy into it. And I realized I was going to retire during the game. The first game of this preseason, I was like, this is it. I'm going to go in. I'm going to ask to take one more at bat against the pitcher, and I'm going to leave. And I did that. And it was a big emotion. Like, I cried a lot that day. And yeah, it really was. It was like a long time coming, man. I just knew it was time.
He had 376. That's a career, man. In any league. You got that right.
Did you hear what I said? I mean, I'm going to the show.
You know what the difference between hitting 250 and 300 is? It's 25 hits. 25 hits and 500 at-bats is 50 points, okay? There's 6 months in a season. That's about 25 weeks. That means if you get just one extra flare a week, just one, a gork, you get a ground ball, you get a ground ball with eyes. You get a dying quail. Just one more dying quail a week, and you're in Yankee Stadium.
I remember hearing that clip way back when I watched Bull Durham for the first time years ago. And even then, it struck me just how fickle the game of baseball can be. Fictional career minor league catcher Crash Davis, played by Kevin Costner, breaks it down in an analytics lesson that always made you ache for those on the fringes of big league staying power, who never quite stuck. One more hit. Reach safely on a hit just once more per week over the season, and you'll go from being designated for assignment, hitting 250 in the minors somewhere, to a big leaguer hitting 300. And as painful and thought-provoking as this scene always has been for me to consider, Ryan's story makes it all the more real. According to baseballreference.com, after 4 seasons of an injury-riddled career in the bigs, 2 with Boston, 2 with Chicago, Ryan saw action in 153 games and 422 plate appearances. He hit .245 for his career, with his best season coming the furthest down that injury journey, hitting exactly .250 with the Cubs. Curious, I plugged Ryan's stats into ChatGPT and prompted this analysis. Quote, considering Kalish's games played, plate appearances, and career batting average, how would his performance have to improve in order for him to be a 300 hitter? End quote. And while Bull Durham came out in 1988, a full 34 plus years before ChatGPT was even a thing, turns out Crash Davis was exactly right. After my prompt, the response, to become a 300 hitter, Ryan Kalish would need an additional 21 hits over the same number of career at-bats, 387. This would increase his hit total to 116, raising his batting average to exactly 300. In practical terms, he would need to convert about one additional hit every 7 games into a base hit over his career to reach this milestone. End quote. So when Crash said it, quote, that means if you get just one extra flare a week, just one gorp, you get a ground ball with eyes, you get a dying quail, just one more dying quail a week, and you're in Yankee Stadium. He was all but manifesting Ryan's future, with the exception of Yankee Stadium being replaced with Fenway Park or Wrigley Field. And maybe it was a ground ball a younger, healthier knee would have allowed Ryan to beat out, or a hard-hit line drive that would have been hit harder still with a healthy shoulder, or a close play for an extra base hit he would have approached with more aggression if not for a chunk of bone cut out of his hip, screwed into his neck. We will can never know what the game of baseball would have been like with a healthy Ryan Kalish. But what we do know is that despite it all, he wasn't done yet.
But it didn't feel good, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I've had that conversation, especially it seems like in baseball, where you've toiled, you've worked through the ranks, in your case, made it to the highest level, and then kind of the downward slope of that, where you've done great things, but it's the champion's mindset that makes you wonder, well, what if this? Or, what if this had gone another way? Or if I hadn't been injured? And so when you emptied that locker out for the last time and headed home in that, what do they call it? The NARP, the non-athletic regular person. What was on your mind, both immediately and in the weeks and months to follow as you started to contemplate a life after baseball?
So this is definitely dark times, but dark times. So it was a feeling throughout my body and just everywhere, like shock and awe and like, what am I going to do now? And what's next? Like, I don't know anything else. I was, like I said, I was a young child and I learned that I loved baseball, and now I'm 30. It was scary. It was, there's a lot of stories in between that year, or let's say 5 years ago and now. Depression, plenty of suicidal ideation occurred, a lot of mental therapy, going to clinics and even facilities for some periods of time to try and understand why I was feeling this way. Ultimately, I felt and I knew that deep down it was a lack of purpose, and it was a lack of what am I going to do? And whatever I want to do, I want it to kind of feel big or just be something important. If it was like in the time trying to figure out what that was, which technically I still am. Yeah, it was about like crying every day for months on end, watching my hands shake, feeling my nervous system freak out. And no one, and the thing is, like, you go from a schedule every day in baseball, be here, someone's checking on you. And then all of a sudden, there's no one there. Nobody cares. And you're like, whoa, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So it was crazy. And even talking about it now, I feel goosebumps because I remember how low some of those days were. And I'm still surprised I feel recovered as I do today.
Well, I thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing that. I think two things. First of all, particularly for men, but not exclusively for men, there's this stigma to sharing emotions, and you have
Sure.
to be tough. You have to be indestructible in order to be a competitive athlete. And I've heard it said that maybe athletics is only second to the military, but either way, we cultivate this idea of invulnerability. I'm tough. I can handle anything. And we also wrap our identity around the job. And for an athlete, that job didn't start after college for you. That really, your training started at 9 years old. So you've spent the majority of the years you can recall pursuing this baseball dream. And now all of a sudden it's gone and you're purposeless. And what fills that void? And for so many athletes, at the time they're most vulnerable, they have the least support. When you're a member of the Boston Red Sox or the Chicago Cubs, there's a medical staff of world-class people that you can call at 3 a.m. and they will drop everything to go help you. And as soon as you're no longer with that organization, that's all gone. And now what do you have? Not to mention the financial ramifications. It's not like you maybe could afford that. So I think sports medicine has done athletes a disservice for a very long time of not taking care of those who have been a part of our organizations. I look at this particularly in colleges because there's no players union for college athletes. Once you're out of, if you go to UVA and you either graduate or transfer out, they're not obligated to help you in any way. Whereas I can see in professional sports, you've got union and you've got some other things to hopefully support you, but it's just it's not what it ought to be. So
I think so too.
So we haven't talked about how you became a pro athlete. You were an elite athlete early. Did you train differently? I think this speaks into the injury side of things. How did you prepare, and what was your speed and strength and agility training program like up until the point where injuries started to take their toll?
Oh man, I would say I was in a Ferrari that had no mechanic. That's what it was. I mean, I pushed myself. I trained hard. I wanted to outwork everyone, and I did, but without especially until after that first round of injuries began around 23, there was barely mobility work. There was no myofascial release, stretching. No, I was a very wound tight, high performance person. And it just, without that sort of education or anything happening at that stage, plus also this feeling, I played football, and obviously, so as a baseball player, you don't have as much contact, but you almost want it because you're like that gritty iron, gridiron guy playing baseball now. And I, was I don't know if I never said it out loud, but I felt I was invincible. Mm-hmm. I felt that. And that's just not, it wasn't true. None of it was true. And it was like at one point, everything just unraveled.
Yeah. So,
that was,
So in terms of your training and preparation, fairly traditional. Sounds like you're a twitchy guy. Like a lot of track athletes, you try to put them on a table and stretch their hamstrings and they don't move, but you look at them in motion and they're twitchy. They're moving, they're explosive. So probably fairly traditional in your preparation. Before we go there, you had a career detour. You were co-owner of Birdman Bats, it looks like. And so you started to cut your teeth in the entrepreneurial space post-baseball. So talk me through that season and maybe how it set you up for your current ventures.
Yes. I've had a bit of an entrepreneurial journey now. So Birdman Bats was kind of always there. Post-baseball, this is all part, like, first I became a Pilates teacher. I took a full education and I simultaneously worked for the Dodgers at the time. And then post that job, I decided I wasn't really feeling well with myself. It was up and down, this post-baseball journey. And I moved to Indonesia, and there I've started a business, do some real estate stuff there while also working with Birdman Bats. But ultimately kind of getting my feet wet in running business, entrepreneurial stuff, which is still a learning all the time. I'm learning all the time, and I'm still running part of that business over in Indonesia, whilst I also work on these other ventures. So it really has taught me a lot, running business, calculating numbers, planning for the future, seeing what's going on. And now I'm a father and a husband as well. So these sort of things will obviously give you a ton of purpose. And also really every day I'm waking up like, how can I be more efficient with my time? How can I do all of these things that I want to be doing? And yeah, it's a work in progress, but for sure, all these entrepreneurial endeavors are getting me ready for what I feel is about to begin.
Yeah. That's certainly an exciting aspect in finding that new purpose once you feel like it's either been taken or it's come to a close. I mean, generally athletics and artistic pursuits for that matter, I've had actors and musicians who have said, once that season came to an end, it was a really lonely, dark space until I found what was next. And that's the theme of this show is we come apart, we're undone before we realize that we're not finished, we're undone. And so that's where kind of the cage and some of your new training methodologies come in, is aligning your athletic experience as an injured athlete with some of your entrepreneurial pursuits. So talk me through the cube and where you came up with the opposition method and decompression concept.
So 14 surgeries going into becoming a Pilates teacher. And if you don't know about Pilates, it was only recently created, let's say 100 years ago. So it's relatively new compared to weightlifting. And I love weightlifting. I love everything about traditional workouts. But I also, with all these injuries, I have pain in my knee. I have pain in my back. I have pain in joints all the time, all day. And I've just been thinking about what could help. And this idea came to me about 4 years ago. Ultimately, I did make a prototype. But talking about undone, my mind is powerful. All of ours are. I essentially talked myself out of chasing this the first time around. I wasn't getting much feedback. It was new. I felt scared. I still feel scared even now to go for it. But essentially my cube, yes, it's a big cage, but it is more of a concept, right? The device can turn out to be anything. I could care less. I more want to bring the concept to life. So yeah, firstly, as simple as I can put it, I think that human beings could benefit greatly from having their feet firmly secured to the ground and having a force pull them to the sky and then asking them to perform a squat. This is a body feeling of mine at the moment. Obviously, it's not proven, but from most of the things that I see, and I am talking to certain physical therapists, even ones that I ultimately kind of thought maybe would be like, no, that's crazy. She even said this could have a lot of scientific merit. And I understand how it works with university and this sort of thing. Like nobody's going to get too hyped on anything until it gets proven. So I'm good with that journey. And it's also helps me to kind of stay realistic and know that to prove, I'm asking a question, can the reverse of a squat be useful? And I feel a little shy and somewhat like this weird shame around asking a question. And then like yesterday, I woke up like, why feel ashamed to ask any question? Why not? Like if you could, I want to help people and that's the ultimate goal. So if I'm acting in that light, if I ask the question, is the reverse of a squat a good thing for people? I shouldn't feel ashamed about asking that question.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, I mentioned in the conversation we had before the show, knees over toes guy, a lot of the training that is logically it makes sense. If training in a certain way led to a result of 14 surgeries for you, then it's worth at least investigating how training in the opposite way might benefit or might offer improvements. We know there's mountains of evidence that says gravity is hard on the back and and inversion tables being an example of one way to decompress the spine, but now you've got blood flow issues. So I love the concept in that you're able to decompress without some of the complications that historically have come with it.
Yeah, and you go to the knees over toes guy, he talks a lot about walking backward, and I do walk backwards, and I pull the sled backwards, and I have a really bad knee. I mean, the stuff that's in there, I mean, is I have metal plates, I have screws, I have, implanted femoral cartilage in there, and I feel it every day. But when I do traditional heavy squats or forward pushing sleds, really, pretty heavy, I feel it in my knee. But when I do the reverse, I don't feel it. So he's definitely a part of my inspiration massively. And yeah, I think that the theory is creating space in the joints, right? Like training. First of all, no one has ever done this before. They've never had to pull themselves to the earth whilst being pulled up to the sky. So it's like a whole new combination of muscles and things you're waking up inside your body. But if you're being pulled up, you're automatically gaining some decompression, especially if it's done comfortably and right? I'm not just saying like create this at your house and just go for it sort of thing. Like this probably should be tested pretty well. But if you're being pulled up and your feet are anchored, and you just stood there, you'd be automatically getting some decompression. Now go ask yourself to lower to the ground. You're strengthening a completely new set of muscles, and that decompression in the ankle, knee, hip, and back joints are not going to go away. In fact, you're going to strengthen these muscles to hopefully hold and keep that decompression lasting. That's the theory, right? I mean, I think, like you said, it does make sense. The way you talk to people, it's like not sounding that crazy.
Yeah.
But no, at least from what I've seen, no one's really talked about this yet.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be that guy.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating concept. I always used to tell my students, we gestate in flexion. We spend our lives in chairs in flexion.
Yeah.
We tend to train in flexion. And so things that counter that neutralize that natural tendency. And so an extension heavy training mode like this, I could certainly see logically, it makes sense to me that it would help balance things out. And you mentioned you were a Ferrari without a mechanic. Frequently we'll talk about athletes who are, traditionally trained. They're really strong anteriorly, but their posterior chain is garbage because they've bench pressed and they've done flies and they've squatted. They've done a lot of anterior chain heavy exercise, and that leads to imbalance. Well, if you put 2 new tires on the left-hand side of your car and old ratty ones on the right, it's not going to handle right. It needs to be balanced. And so I think there's certainly something to this. So you've been through so much, and I appreciate your transparency and kind of talking about some of those dark days post-baseball. One of the focuses of this show is, what could we share with perhaps the younger generation? What is some advice you might have given yourself? If you could talk to young Ryan, 9 years old, getting that Nerf bat for the first time, what's maybe the most valuable piece of information you could share with him for the journey he's about to set out on?
Stay humble, stay confident, and don't believe your negative self-talk. Because the last one, especially the negative self-talk, whether it be, I'm probably going to get hurt again, or you can't become a Pilates teacher, or if you start talking about a squat where you're getting pulled up to the sky, you are insane and people are going to judge you. This stuff is still something that I'm working on now.
Yeah.
But I will say, especially now when I'm suggesting exploring this new concept, I am not going to listen to myself at all with this. Like anytime that I wake up and feel like, no one's listening yet, screw it. I'm going to just stop and continue whatever my business in Indonesia and just go quiet again. I just don't believe that that's going to make me feel fulfilled. I think pushing through the negative self-talk and trying to talk myself out of things and still pushing through and going for it is ultimately the lesson I would like myself to still learn. But for sure, for young people, man, it like in this day and age of social media and seeing everyone, put out these images of doing all these cool things, if you believe every negative thing your mind tells you, you're going to have a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I've heard it sound that if someone spoke to us the way we speak to ourselves, we'd spend a lot of time probably punching them in the mouth. We wouldn't allow someone to disrespect us like that. But yet, if we let that inner dialogue do that, it's probably more damaging.
Yeah, exactly. It's what it is. So that's my lessons for myself too.
All right. Well, we're winding it down here. This one's kind of an oddball one. I love music and the emotions that it can frequently represent. If we were to watch a montage of your life,
sure,
what song would be playing in the background and why?
This song by Ben Balmer, and the song title is called Beyond Beliefs. It's this fluffy, really good vibe techno song. And it just really, it's actually what I have attached to a few of my posts recently. And yeah, the title is kind of on the theme of what we're saying here. Like, but go beyond belief in yourself, whatever you're saying to yourself, especially if it's bad, don't believe that, go beyond it. Like for me, it's, now I want to explore and validate if my idea is correct. Most people would say a traditional weighted squat is the way to go. I'm saying I'm going beyond my belief because I think that this other thing could really, really help as well. So this is the theme, man. Beyond Beliefs by Ben Balmer. It's a great track. If you ever have time to check it out. Yeah, no, I actually have a running Becoming UnDone mixtape on Spotify where all my guests' song picks get dropped in. So nice. We'll make it into the mix. Well, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but what for Ryan Kalish remains undone? Oh, man. What remains undone? This chase right now of the cube and, let's say, my decompression squat theory and all this is undone because I don't know where it's going to lead yet. But in general, just putting myself out there like this, I mean, yes, of course, truly my ultimate dream in life is to create a company that brings a lot of innovative products, because this is just one thing I have on my mind. I have 10 to 15 other things, but I realize I need to focus in on one before the rest can blossom. So that's sort of, that's undone, I want to see that through. But again, if, let's say, this whole concept didn't play out, I have a great story and I have skills. I can already put together things to help people feel better in their body, like certain myofascial techniques, all these things that I learned through those 14 surgeries and rehab. So believing that my voice can have an impact on the internet actually also feels undone. Like I want to start sharing my life. It's been 4 years, actually. I didn't post at all, basically. So yeah, it's undone to tell my story and to put myself out there and see where that can take me. Yeah, well, it's a powerful story, certainly an inspiration, and I appreciate you sharing with me. How can listeners connect with the work that you're doing? I know you're on Instagram. Drop those, and I'll put them in the show notes. You can check me out on Instagram or Twitter, and I don't know, maybe you have any suggestions on other platforms. I'm happy to start outreaching everywhere. Yeah, for sure. I am Ryan Kalish, and I am undone. Ryan Kalish's journey is a testament to resilience, reinvention, and the courage to embrace the unknown. From the absolute pinnacle of pro sports to the challenges of navigating life after baseball, Ryan's shown us all that setbacks might not be what we would have chosen, but they can be what we needed to discovering new purpose.
His willingness to confront his struggles, share his story, and explore innovative and new ways to help others speaks volumes about his character and his determination. If there's one thing we can take away, it's that true success lies not in avoiding adversity, but in how we choose to face it and to rise and redefine ourselves after the fact. I'm thankful to Ryan for dropping in, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. For more info on today's episode, be sure to check it out on the web. Simply go to undonepodcast.com/EP110 to see the notes, links, and images related to today's guest, Ryan Kalish. I know there are great stories out there to be told, and I'm always on the lookout. So if you or someone you know has a story we can all be inspired by, tell me about it. Surf on over to undonepodcast.com, click that contact tab in the top menu, and drop me a note. Coming up on the show, I have longtime friend, former D1 gymnast and coach turned inspiring personal development consultant, Mary Reese Farias, coming up next week. I'm also wrapping up the final week of the Big Podcast 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge with David Hooper over on my other show, The Professor's Playbook, so be sure to check it out. This and more coming up on Becoming Undone. Becoming Undone is a Nitro Hype creative production written and produced by me, Toby Brooks. Do me a favor, tell a friend about the show, follow along on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at Becoming Undone Pod, and follow me at Toby J. Brooks on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Check out my link tree at linktr.ee/Toby J. Brooks. Listen, subscribe, and please leave me a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, keep getting better.